Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations at the Edge with Christopher John Stubbs. The topic today is exploring the rifts between us, and it's a little early for me. I'm a little sleepy, and Christopher doesn't have his headset, so we got a little background noise, but we are live, and we are dealing with it. So, he's a dear friend of mine and amazing trailblazing presence in the world as a coach, as a mentor, as a trainer, an inspirer. But one of the things that I said when I invited you to this dialogue was this is not a training. This is just you and I having a conversation on this topic. And we explored a couple of different possible titles. And one of the reasons I kind of went in this direction was because I know that you're so passionate about relationship and connecting, not just with your amazing marriage with Megan and your kids, your friends and family, but also I know you do a lot of trainings for helping men connect. A lot of men don't have the kind of close friendships that they really need. So I know this is a very passionate topic for you. So when I suggested exploring the rifts between us, what did that kind of mean for you, and how did that resonate?
Resonated very strongly, and a lot of things as you mentioned it, and as I've thought about it since then. I've thought about, my parents' rocky marriage that ended in divorce and all the pain that was associated with that. I thought about, the finger pointing that goes back and forth on Facebook between adults. How the left and the right on politics are always at each other. How, in general, everyone wants to talk. It seems a lot, and we tend to have this desire to push our opinions, defend our stories, defend our reasons for whatever, and so often we don't choose to listen. So often we create all this chaos and create war. Ultimately, all the war that's happening out there, whether it be actual bombs and guns and all that, or simply, how we have more than a 50% divorce rate here in the United States, to how we interact as grown adults on Facebook. There's rifts in every level of society, and so we could go off on a 100 rabbit hole. Explorations, I think, around this.
Right. If you just before we proceed, I was going to want to we want to see your lovely face, Christopher. So, and just a side question: are you aware of where you're sitting and what's on the board right beside you there? What does it say? No, the other side, right there. Love. You got love right beside you there.
Beautiful.
So beautiful serendipity there. What does it say under there? Love is fake.
Geez. There's a
man. Oh, God. Someone has been wounded by love and thinks love is fake. That's sad.
So it looks like first someone wrote love, and then someone came with their
is fake. There we go.
Love, and their riff with someone's version or expression of love.
So at the very last minute, as we were coming up with the titles, actually the title that was proposed prior to the one we went with was Healing the Rifts Between Us. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons, although that sounds really great, and that may maybe make a great title for a training or a workshop, I actually suggested going with exploring, because then it's more of an open question and staying in a place of curiosity around what is that? What is the rift? What what is it? Because then you just look, and then that's kind of what I want us to do here, is look at what is that rift, not assuming there shouldn't be a rift or assuming we know what it is, so we just fix it. And I know when I mentioned that, that also resonated with you, to just be curious.
I loved your suggestion about that, because so many reasons on multiple levels. I mean, one, like when we judge any aspect of life and assume it shouldn't be there, we've essentially created a rift within ourselves the second we judge that there shouldn't be a rift, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, when we show, if we were to show up saying like, here's how it is, like, which I tend to do a lot, then like you said, like instead of approaching it with curiosity, with wonder, with presence, then there's not a lot to learn when we're essentially doing what I was saying people do on Facebook, speaking, defending, whatever, versus one, being curious, and two, just exploring with that wonder as equals in a conversation.
Yeah, and that is, it isn't. Well, what comes to mind is like, just kind of feeling into the energetics of it. When someone proposes a different opinion or has a different point of view, we feel inside of us the divide between our position and their position. Yeah. And it feels like, and I know this from my own life too, like when I've had that kind of energetic rift with someone where we're really not in agreement, there is a hurt inside that causes us to want to fix it. And and I think perhaps the knee-jerk reaction that so many of us have learned is that we go on the attack, like your position is wrong, and instead of being able to kind of just address the, wow, I feel really disconnected from you because our positions are so different, that feels really awkward, or that feels really painful to know that someone else that I care about perhaps really disagrees so strongly on this subject with me. We have a hard time like actually just emitting the real dialogue. We jump to this surface dialogue of the disagreement rather than acknowledging the rift, and certainly in the closer the relationships are, the more charged they are because there's so much to lose. So for you, what was the first time that you really had a kind of sense of that rift in a way that really made you pay attention to it and want to do something about changing the way you interacted with people?
I'm not sure if I know the answer to when I first, recognized the rift. It's probably 15 years ago when I really started to wake up to the possibility that life wasn't happening to me and that I wasn't a victim to everything that was happening to me or around me or in my life, and that the way I was showing up was affecting the way life was meeting me and others in my life. And when I, then I started to learn different skills and outlooks and communication skills and listening skills and presencing skills and mindsets and really, Kathleen Hendricks told me back then, probably 10 or 12 years ago, she said she believed that the next evolution of mankind, and I'm paraphrasing, the next evolution of mankind was in our ability to try on other people's point of view. That love was a container big enough to, love didn't need us to agree. Right? That's what we tend to think is, we can't be friends if we don't agree. Well, I know a couple that the wife's a vegan, and I don't actually know them personally. I read about them, but the wife's a vegan, and the husband's a hunter, right? Loves meat.
Carnivore, yeah.
Yeah, and so and they're happily in love, right? Now most couples would be like, well, you need to see it my way, but Catherine pointed out that love is a container. If you think of it as like this big bucket or this big room, this big container, and it can hold, like I'm in a room right here with 5 other people right now, and we all have varying views on life, varying opinions. I haven't talked to them yet, and maybe won't, but it's okay. There's a container right here that's big enough. Yeah, someone, Hannah, saying love doesn't need us to agree. I love that.
Yeah.
So, love the container. Love is a container big enough to hold all of our differences, all of our varying opinions, and we don't need to agree to stand in the space of love. And also, these 2 countries that are bordering countries, and they have a past of killing each other's brothers and fathers and sons. But they've chosen beyond that now. And so they do have a border. They still don't like each other.
Yeah.
But once a year, they have a parade. They open up the border, and they have a parade that goes through both cities that are on the border. And in the parade, they both have an opportunity to do a march/expressive interpretive dance/march that expresses their anger and frustration at each other. No weapon, no violence, no physical contact, no mean words. It's just a congenial and civil demonstration and expression without an actual attack, no name calling, no violence. And this is an annual celebration that they come together, open up, and express. They don't stuff down the anger. They don't spiritually bypass it, but they choose to express and open up space for that. So, to bring it back, like the more I've sat with that for the last 10, 12 years, and I think the more we can just find it in ourselves to try on others' points of view, to not have to be right, to be more interested in connection and love and integrity than knowing it all or being right, and really be curious and open to understanding and experiencing, to trying on. And it's not just understanding here, like, how do we try that on like a shirt? Like, how does that feel? What does it feel like to be that person? Where are they coming from and why? And what's that like? And, anyway.
No, it's powerful stuff. As you were talking there, one of the things that I thought about was, and this is a deep subject, and I don't want us to go into it so deeply today, but in the gene keys. So anyone curious about that, check it out. The gene keys. There's 64 gene keys, and the 52nd gene key, which has the shadow of stress, has kind of one of the. Oh, we have lost Christopher here. Oh, you're back. You dropped out for a second. So the 52nd gene key has the shadow of stress, but it has the gift of restraint. And through restraint, it leads to stillness. And as you were talking, because what you were describing was a situation where people, two different sides who didn't like each other or agree, decided to exercise a certain amount of restraint. So underneath, there's this shadow of stress, the conflict, and they decide, okay, we're not going to act on it in a way that is mutually destructive. We're going to acknowledge that it's there, but we're going to exercise restraint, and that seems to be something that. Some people think that to be free, you must be able to say anything that's on your mind. But that, well, kids do that, and there's certainly a place for free expression. But there are times when free expression becomes destructive, and it doesn't help anyone. So it's a tricky balance. But you have two people, like the couple you mentioned, who love each other, but have, two very different positions on diet. And I certainly know there are a lot of vegans who are very, very passionate about feeling like eating any meat is wrong, right? It's not just a preference, but they have an ideological position, so that that difference could create a lot of conflict, but you can acknowledge that difference and not make it the only focus of how you interact and how you connect. And I think, but that takes a certain amount of restraint, like, okay, we disagree on this, we're not coming to any further agreement on it, so how do we find peace within that? I mean, that would, you'd say that's a, in view of the topic here, that's a rift. You've got two different positions, there's this rift between you in that particular area, but finding commonality despite that, finding a way of connecting despite that. Yeah. Because, I mean, if there's the assumption that, okay, there's this rift between us, a disagreement, and we have to solve it. If we can solve it, it will be better. Well, then that will continue. Like some positions aren't going to change, and some disagreements aren't going to be solved. And so finding that peace and that, oh, wow, you are so different than me in this particular area. Talking about like Facebook, even here in Portland, Oregon, we've had this terrible fire in the gorge, which is such a beloved area for people to go hiking and enjoy nature. And, it's devastating for a lot of people. And in turn, it looks like it was caused by a teenager with fireworks. And so, but, watching the dialogue of people taking their position, and it's not that people shouldn't have their position, but, we're watching so much conflict arise because, there are those who say, well, he should be punished terribly. And, even people suggesting, wow, if I were there, I would have pushed him into the fire, like, really extreme. But that's an expression of like, people are deeply hurt by something so terrible happening to a beloved sanctuary. But that's like that stress inside, and people are wanting to project it out, and they take it out on the person they feel is responsible. They'll take it out on someone who doesn't have the same position as them. And there's no solution to that. There's no solution if you're thinking, okay, we need to agree. And that you watch people argue and argue and argue and argue because they're trying to find an agreement. So what's a different way of approaching these kinds of rifts?
So there's a few things coming to mind as you were sharing all that brilliance and that beautiful expression. One, our tendency to believe that punishment, blame, have this tendency to go to blame, like somehow blame is an important thing. We got to figure out who's to blame for this so they can be punished. And like you so eloquently expressed, that's just an outward expression of their anger, their rage, their frustration, their pain, right? So they're feeling this pain. If they were to speak unarguably, which is a key tool, actually, if you ask how can we do something different, to speak unarguably would be very helpful, right? So
well, before you go on, could you maybe describe what that means for those who don't know what that means?
Yeah, so if I were in that situation, if I were to speak unarguably, instead of like, that POS, he should be killed or whatever, he should be punished tremendously. If I were to speak unarguably, it would more sound something more like, wow, I notice a tremendous weight in my chest, and I feel, heaviness in my throat, and I'm noticing that I have a lot of sadness and even tension in my neck and anger and frustration as I try on the possibility that I won't, what it must be like for Mother Earth to continuously experience the effects of us, and two, that the sanctuary that I love and I visit will no longer be available to me. I notice sadness and hurt and anger and rage in me, and I've even had angry, villainous, ugly thoughts about the guy who lit it and all these things, and I'm choosing to be with myself. And what I ultimately want is a happy, healthy earth and happy, healthy people and consciousness and wisdom and you know, something. Yeah. So ultimately, to speak unarguably would be to speak from, you know, take the blame out, take the projection out, speak as I, speak about my own experience, speak about, you know, what I feel.
Hey, you dropped out for a second, Christopher. Okay, Christopher dropped out again. His testimony is too powerful for this platform, so let's just hope he pops back on there. Hey, you're back. You dropped out for a second. Well, thank you for that beautiful sharing here. Well, you know, as you were sharing all of that, I mean, what really strikes me is like, you know, as you were saying it, I could feel myself like really softening inside, because it was like, that's vulnerable. That's vulnerable to share like that. And, you know, in general, it's not necessarily a very well-cultivated gift for most people. And certainly, and I know you work very closely with a lot of men in your trainings, and for men to speak like this, you know, is not particularly common, because it's not considered strong or masculine to be vulnerable about like your actual experience. You know, and people have a hard time speaking like that. It puts you, you know, you're not, like, you use the word protected, right? You know, like you don't feel protected when you actually share your heart. But there's obviously, when, I mean, you have honed that and you've gotten used to it. But here's the thing about vulnerability is, vulnerability is something you might get used to, but it still feels vulnerable, right? You know, like, it's not going to feel like, if you're used to feeling protected and taking a position and hiding behind that position, that feels strong. That's going to feel familiar. Like, that's a good stance to take. Okay, I have my strong opinion and I'm standing behind that opinion. Being vulnerable is always vulnerable, but when two people can meet in that space of vulnerability, they don't have to agree. But, like, you know, one of the things that happens is, as you share that, I can see you. I can see who you are. And even if you're not exactly like me or have all the same positions as me, I get to see you. And if I were to do the same, then you get to see me. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't a rift. And that's the kind of the interesting thing that I kind of wanted to weave into this, is that instead of the assumption being, how do we heal the rift? How do we get rid of disagreement? How do we get rid of the things that we think stand between us? But instead, like, exploring the rift, you know, if you do that with vulnerability and openness, with honesty, you could see that there is a divide. Oh, you have a very different position than me. Well, here's how I feel. And in doing so, there's something that happens between people that brings them together in a way that is different than agreement. And certainly in this day and age, with all the political strife, and we're so polarized on so many different issues, that is sorely needed. And especially, you know, as we're seeing, you know, well, it's one thing to have political disagreements. We each have our own preference of how we want to do things, but we do seem to be seeing an increase of pressure in the world, like very real pressure. you know, with our effect on the environment, diminishing resources, you know, increase in population, change in weather patterns, you know, regardless of why you think it's happening, you know, there's the whole climate change versus, you know, like, is that true or is that not? Like, even beyond that, we can see that there's an increase in pressure on the earth, not just humans, but like, you know, the entire environment and all its inhabitants. With that increased pressure, I mean, it's like, it almost feels like we're getting pushed into a corner where we have to find a way that is different than how we've done things. And we have Jake Hoffman here saying human utopia. Well, utopia has a bad word for a lot of people. It has a, you know, it means something good for others. So I'm not sure what Jake is alluding to in terms of that, but we do need to find a different way in which to cohabitate with each other, with the earth, you know, and hopefully, what's that?
With ourselves.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. How do we do that? How do we have a different relationship with ourselves? Because we're talking about the rifts out there. How do we live with the rifts within ourselves? Oh, and Jake just clarified. I felt like that is what Christopher was describing earlier. Well, I'm sure we could all use a little human utopia right about now, whatever that would actually be.
Yeah.
We could start an argument about how to achieve that, though. I think that's been done before.
Yeah, that'd be
more than once. So about the rifts inside of us, like, let's explore that for a second.
So probably about 10 years ago, I was hanging out with the Lakota tribe, and I was doing a lot of things. But with them, I did vision questing, amongst many other ceremonies and processes, and a powerful experience. But on my very first vision quest, I'm sitting out there for 3 or 4 days and nights, no food, no water, no nothing, on a mountain, just me in a sleeping bag on a mountainside. And no books, no distractions, just me being present in nature, praying and connecting and seeking to receive inspiration. And I'm, you know, highly intuitive and sensitive and aware of the pain of the world, and have had a strong desire to make the world a better place and all these things. And after 3-4 days, this strong clarity and sense came over me, and it showed me in this very deep and visceral experience how all of the rifts that exist are just an extension of the rifts within me. It was different languaging at the time, right? So if you look at the drama triangle, victim, villain, hero, if you look at all drama that's created in all of humans, there's always 3 positions in all of that drama. There's a victim, there's a villain, and there's a hero. So you take this fire in Oregon. The victim is all the people, you know, the forest, Mother Earth, and all the people. The hero, the firefighters that are putting it out, and all of that. The villain, the guy that started the fire, right? So no matter what's going on in our drama, then there's those 3 roles. Now, if we step out of that drama into essence, and you try on all the positions, you know, I try on the firework kid. He's probably a young kid. He probably pushed the boundaries many times. Probably learning some big lessons right now. Probably really scared and sad, and who knows, you know, what his experience is. And it's very unfortunate for all of us that he gets to learn that experience at such a great expense to all of us. But anyway, when we connect from that essence, then there's so much more available. So what I got in that vision quest was all of the, when I choose essence here, I step out of that drama triangle with myself, like the way I relate with myself. Ultimately, my parents and society modeled for me the songs I've listened to, the movies I've seen, the people I've listened to, the parents that modeled everything for me. That's what taught me what relationships are, which was guilt, shame, blame, attack, criticism, manipulation, control, division, and whatever else the ego, unconscious, unaware, conditioned relationships do. And so what I realized in that moment was, holy cow, every relationship in my life is nothing more than an extension, an expression, and projection of the way I relate with me. So when I judge myself harshly, when I abuse myself, when I ignore myself, when I abandon myself, when I victimize, villainize, or hero myself. So when I judge, the hero would be me justifying myself, right? And like trying to defend or justify or whatever. The villain would be the part that beats myself up. You idiot, what are you thinking? What's wrong with you? And then the victim, like, why does all this happen to me, right? So if my outer world is just an extension of my inner world, then the best thing I can do to change my outer world is to handle me. And I don't know if the word handle is right, but optimal, but to be right with me. When I'm in right relationship with me and my source, whatever that is, that's the foundational hub to all the other, then you can put your wife and your romantic relationships, your parents, your family of origin, your friends, your children, your extended family, your tribe, your community, whatever outside of that. But the hub is right here between me and my maker. And when I get right there, the rest of that stuff will sort itself out.
Right. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of different ways in which people can come to that right relationship. But there's a brilliant way of making that analogy of seeing those archetypal roles externally and internally. Because even in the spiritual world, or even religious or self-help, self-development world, I mean, there can be a lot of that hero energy of like, you could feel victimized, you could be beating yourself up and want to be a better person, right? But then you could go into that hero role and like almost bully yourself, like, I'm going to make myself a better person, which is, certainly in the hero role, there can be times when, certainly God bless all those firefighters that are out there. There are times when there are fires to put out, but it seems like we don't have enough available archetypes or even approaches. Like, what's another way? We've got these three options. What's another way than that? Even internally, and certainly you've alluded to it earlier about the vulnerability and the presencing, like to notice. I mean, that vulnerability that you shared earlier about how you can communicate with another. I mean, that of course starts with yourself. When, being able to notice where we feel victimized within ourselves, and we could feel victimized by ourselves, not just by the world, right? I don't treat myself as well as I would like, like being able to confess that, like I need to speak to myself in a kinder way. We've all made mistakes. We've all come up short in so many different ways and throughout our life, but being able to speak to yourself with vulnerability, like you shared earlier, to like, wow, I noticed I'm really disappointed with myself. I'm not really proud of these thoughts that I have, or this behavior that I have, maybe even if it's behavior others are not even going to see. And in the self-development community, I mean, we're often told to kind of like pull our boots up by the bootstraps and make ourselves a better person, right? Or even the way some people are taught to meditate is like you got to stand on guard for all those terrible thoughts you have, because your thoughts create reality. So please, for God's sake, don't fuck up and have bad thoughts, because you're going to destroy the world. there's a lot of really tricky energy around how we navigate and try to control our own experience. So what did you find was that other way, rather than going to those three archetypes in your relationship with yourself?
So one of the biggest things for me around this is a quote that Einstein said, something about, no problem can be solved from the same state in which it was created.
Right.
So earlier we were talking about how people think that somehow if we can come to agreement, then we can get along again. Right? Until then, I'm going to withdraw my love. I'm going to give you the cold shoulder. There's going to be a distance between us. I'm going to teach you a lesson for disagreeing. It's really a subtle, or not so subtle form of manipulation. Like, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to make you pay because I need you to agree with me for me to be okay. Right? So if we shift from, so when you're dealing with couples, let's use this as an example. You have a couple, a romantic couple, or someone who's in tight relationship, could be business partners or anybody. So you're working together extensively, you're in tight relationship, and you have a rift arise. The tendency is, okay, what we need to do is communicate back and forth until we agree, and then everything will be okay again. But if we stop that and we said, no, let's interrupt that pattern, because that's the pattern the whole world's operating on. We say, no, what needs to happen here is I get to get in a connected, loving, integrous state within me. And if you choose to do that and you too, then from that place, what I described as essence, and essence meaning at the core, it's based on a belief or philosophy that at the core of us, we're actually beautiful. We're one. We're wonderful. We're knowledgeable. We have access to all the answers, like that. The essence of who we are, beyond all our personas and all our survival mechanisms and all our, archetypes and whatever we do for survival. If we get past all that to our heart, to our soul, or whatever our essence, and we operate from that place, then, like I started with, Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same state in which it was created. So once we reach the rift, if we went, we're in a rift, and instead of going, so now we need to argue and prove who's right, we stop and say, no, this is a time for me to shift my state of being, to get out of, because what's actually happening is we're thinking thoughts, we get triggered and go to a primal part of our brain that is all about fight or flight response, right? So our state is now fight or flight, which is I have to dominate, control, or run. Right? I have to mentally, physically, emotionally beat you up in one form or another, or I have to run away and get away from you. Right. So from that state, we can't solve anything. We can't come up with solutions. We can't try on anyone else's point of view. We can't anything except fight or flee. Right. And so the number one key at that point is to get in the habit. So we have to, one, realize that that's what's happening. Two, get really good at capturing that in the moment, or being aware of that in the moment, and then choosing consciously, like, no, I've been down this road 100 times. Every time it's drama, it's chaos, it's destruction. It doesn't serve, or maybe it does serve, but until it doesn't. But I'm not interested in that game anymore. I'm going to stop. I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to get clear with me. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to shift my state of being from fight or flight and survival to a state of spaciousness, a state of curiosity, a state of wonder. And it shifts us physiologically up to the frontal lobes where we can actually solve problems. So this is the physiology and psychology of what Einstein was describing, is I actually have the ability to shift my state rather than just having the conditioned response of course I'm pissed off, and of course I'm justified, and of course you're to blame. It's like, yes, I feel these feelings. Yes, I have this experience. Yes, I'll be with myself, and I'll feel and acknowledge those. I'm not going to bypass them. I'm not going to ignore them. I'm not just going to plow through them. But I'll acknowledge them. I'll be with them. I'll be with myself in a good way. I'll breathe. I'll speak inarguably. I will, create a body, because our body posture locks in attitudes and minds. So if I'm like this, then I'm going to have this attitude. And if I'm like this, then I can actually open up to receive. And so open up my body posture, create movement, breathe, get into a wondrous state. And from there, we're now up in an ability to now dialogue in a conscious way that says, okay, I'm noticing this. What I'm wanting is this. What are you noticing? So when we get into that state of love, that state of integrity, that state of coming from our heart and our essence, then from that place, anything's possible because we've shifted our state.
Well, that's beautiful. That is so descriptive, and hopefully gives people a really good kind of idea of what this looks like. I do want to kind of add in here, because I know that for a lot of people who maybe are more naturally inclined to this, can get into very sticky situations with when they try to apply this with people who aren't as able or willing to do this themselves. So within this, where does the issue of boundaries come in? Because in discussions with friends and clients, you know, there can be this tricky situation where someone actually has the capacity to do what you just described, and then they're trying to do it with someone who can't do it or doesn't want to do it or appears to do it but is actually doing it in a manipulative way, which they get you to open up, and then they wait for their attack a little bit later. And I know people have been burned so many times with how to navigate that partnership, because I mean what you're describing is, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like in partnerships, if two people are basically both willing to meet each other, then there's a possibility that this can work powerfully. But if you have one party who is able and willing and another party who isn't, what then?
So, you know, the first example that comes up is, you know, there's a men's group on Facebook that I'm a member of, but sometimes I wonder if I want to be a member of or not. And it has like 20 or 30,000 members, and there's some cool dudes in there, and there's a bunch of dudes in there, and what's more true, rather than there's cool and not so cool, it'd be more like there's people I resonate with and people I don't resonate with. And so like when we talk about men speaking vulnerably, so often in that group, a man will go in there and share his heart in a beautiful way, or some post of value showing the importance of our feelings or connecting or authenticity or vulnerability or whatever that I resonate with and see the value in, because I grew up not that way. I was trained the opposite. I was trained to be very cold and not connect with feelings and not express and just plow through and whatever. So I've experienced both sides, and I prefer the vulnerable side, the connected side. And based on all the studies and whatever, I have my reasons and experiences. But anyway, when someone in that group posts that way, a bunch of men will jump on the bandwagon and say, "You're a pansy, you need to toughen up, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, and so in that scenario, I just don't respond, right? I could argue with them for ever, and all it would do is consume my energy. So I just take a breath, you know, maybe send them love and just let them be in their experience. I may, you know, if someone else responds that, you know, I may like or comment and fortify the good that I see, but it's kind of like Mother Teresa, I think, said, like, if you hold an anti-war rally, I won't be there. But if you hold a pro-peace rally, you know, I'll be there. Right. So it's so easy to want to get sucked into standing against something, and I tend to lean towards the standing for something rather than against something. Choose the side that I... So anyway, so what do I do in those situations where someone's not willing? In general, I just let them be. Yeah. Take a breath and get myself right and carry on, and then do my best to be wise about. So you asked about boundaries. In general, if someone demonstrates, so one of my highest values is openness to learning. Yeah. Right. We've been taught a lot about humility being like reflecting compliments and belittling myself and beating myself up and making myself to be small and insignificant. I don't subscribe to those beliefs about humility. I actually have redefined humility for myself to mean willing to learn from anybody, everybody, everything, anytime, anywhere. That everything's a learning experience, and to just like the nature of this call, you're like, instead of talking about healing the rift, let's explore what can we actually learn in this discussion ourselves as we explore this and see what else is possible, rather than just defending another position about rifts. So that openness to learning, basically, if someone doesn't be open to learning, I'm probably not going to go out of my way to foster an ongoing interaction and relationship with them.
Right. So, I mean, for those, I've had many discussions with people who would maybe see themselves as more an empath, so that they can really sense very strongly what's going on in the world and in other people. And people with that level of sensitivity are often much more affected by the words and actions of others, which, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's good because you can really tune into someone, in right relationship. That sensitivity is a tremendous gift, but with people who are not so mindful of their interaction with you, that can be pretty painful. So what you're saying is if the other party isn't demonstrating an openness to learn and perhaps a willingness to meet you halfway, not necessarily to agree on the actual subject matter, but it's more, I guess maybe there's maybe a kind of a sense of an agreement of engagement. Like, how will we engage? Not will we agree on the subject matter, but are you willing to meet me in a certain way, and in the way that we communicate, like agreeing to disagree. And also agreeing to a certain civility in the interaction. And if one party is meeting your vulnerability with more attack, well then, I mean, if they're demonstrating again and again that they can't meet you there, you can't do it for them. And it's also not kind to yourself to unnecessarily expose yourself to continued attack. So there's definitely a place for setting certain boundaries and decisions about who you're going to interact with and who you're not going to. Absolutely.
Early in my conscious journey, when they started to teach me, everything's a learning opportunity and it's all feedback and blah, blah, blah. And what I would do is sit and be in these abusive or toxic or whatever you want to call it, relationships, and make it all about what can I learn and why. So, why does this keep happening? And basically, what was finally shown to me is like, if your hand's on the hot stove, rather than holding your hand there, wondering why it's burning and what you're supposed to learn from it, the lesson was really quick and easy. Just remove your hand from the stove. Right, so when something's not working, it's there's the other side of don't just quit every time something gets hard, or you run into the counter commitments or resistance. But being clear on who you are, knowing your authentic truth, knowing how to check in and identify an authentic yes or no place within you, to honor your highest nature, your highest truth, the highest good for all. And to be committed to those things is definitely key. And sometimes, like I say, it's not about allowing, don't just keep your hand on the stove. If you're burning and it's not working at all, the lesson's really simple. Move your hand off the stove.
Right. Well, and I think it would seem that part of the process for people in coming into right relationship with themselves is to learn to trust themselves. Yeah. And there might be times in which you need to err primarily in your own favor, in the sense that, okay, I don't feel safe. So like, if you've learned that, okay, everything is a lesson, and you're looking for this deep lesson, while your hand is still burning, I mean, you're erring on the side of because the assumption is, there's something I'm not getting about this, but you're already getting a signal that says, I don't feel safe. and it's not that, because it's no decision or conclusion is the final one you'll always make, but in this moment, like if you're in a conversation with someone and you feel unsafe and you're trying to be vulnerable and they're counterattacking and you're always trying to see how you might be wrong, like what am I doing wrong, because look at how they're reacting. But if you trust that, okay, wow, I do not feel safe right now with this person, I feel scared to be vulnerable, I feel attacked with what they're saying, extract yourself from the situation and reassess. I mean, it's like the hand on the stove. It's like, this hurts. Well, trust your instinct that I don't want to have my hand there.
Yeah.
And you can reassess. You can reassess, was that an overreaction or was that appropriate? But that's that right relationship with yourself. I mean, you know, I guess even in close friendships or romantic relationships, there can be moments where you might need to say, right in this moment, I don't feel safe to be this vulnerable. I'm going to extract myself from this situation right now. But we can revisit this later, but I don't think I can handle this right now. Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
But all this takes some practice of getting used to a new way of relating to ourselves and to each other.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, we've gone for a little over 50 minutes here, and we should probably kind of move towards wrapping up this conversation for now. Thank you for accepting the invitation. You know, honestly, being able to get about an hour of your time just to connect and see your face and converse. For my own selfish reasons, I love and adore you and really appreciate you and our friendship. So if we had to set this context and have everyone listen in, if that's what it takes to get you get connected with you, I'm fine with that. I know you are a very, very busy man between your relationship, your kids, and all the clients you're serving. So thank you for taking time. Any last words on this or thoughts you'd like to share?
Really just such a joy to connect with you in such a stimulating and enjoyable and just a wonderful way. So the feelings are mutual. I really appreciate you and love our conversations. Love dialoguing with you and others in my circle that I can have these stimulating conversations with and just enjoy it. Going beyond surface level stuff and all of that. So thank you for who you are, and thanks for this.
Awesome. And once this video is done, I'll be sure to post any links to be able to connect with you or any of the groups that you're running and any of the trainings that you're doing if people are interested in that, so they can follow up and connect with you.
Awesome.
So thank you, Christopher, and I hope you have an amazing day. And we'll probably do this another time on another topic if you're willing.
Yep, I would love that. I was having that same thought.
Okay, awesome. Okay, we're going to end the broadcast here today. Everyone who has listened in now or is going to be listening in later, thank you. And if you have any questions or reflections, please share it in the comments. This dialogue can keep going. As we've seen on Facebook, the threads can get long, and if the topic is good, that's not a bad thing. Okay, have a great day, Christopher, and everyone else.
Blessings, Christian.
Okay, bye now.